All right, let's get something straight. Today, we're not just analyzing another pop star. No, we're looking at a full-blown cultural phenomenon, a force of nature, really, whose appeal just, well, it seems to break all the rules. So we're going to break down the actual mechanics behind the universal magnetism of Dua Lipa. Our little investigation, it starts right now. So to really do this right, we've got to put on a specific hat, a scientific one. We're going to push all the fandom, all the personal feelings to the side so we can get to the absolute core of what's going on here. And, our examination will be polite. The subject, after all, seems perfectly pleasant.
And just so we're crystal clear, this is not a gushing fan review. Think of us more as cultural anthropologists today. Our goal here is to understand the mechanics of her appeal, not just, sit here and admire it. So yeah, consider this a clinical analysis.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to lay out the central problem, that universal appeal of hers. Then we'll dive into 4 key components that we think explain this whole thing. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with our final diagnosis. It's a structured path, our roadmap to understanding. All right, section 1. Let's start with the big question, right? The very anomaly that kicked off this whole investigation in the first place. What is the specific nature of Dua Lipa's appeal? I mean, this is really the core mystery, isn't it? Her appeal isn't just for one specific group. It's huge. It's incredibly broad. We're talking across different sexual orientations, different social groups, in a way that you almost never see with public figures. So the big question is, why? What's the common denominator here? Okay, so our first piece of evidence, it points to something we're calling the regulated feminine. And what this is really all about is the kind of energy she projects. Think of it like a zone of stability in what is, let's be honest, a pretty chaotic celebrity world.
So take a look at this. It kind of lays out the whole spectrum of the modern pop world, right? On one side, you've got what we'll call hyper chaos, the public meltdowns, the constant drama. Then, way over on the other side, you've got hyper alien art, these celebrities who are so untouchable, they're like a museum piece. Most stars, they live at these extremes. But Dua Lipa? She's right there in the middle. She's this neutral, calibrated zone. The vibe she gives off is just, my life is in order.
And this regulated feminine energy, it's absolutely crucial. See, the human brain, and according to our source, this is especially true for the male brain, is just wired to pick up on this kind of stability, even if we don't realize it. We're all drawn to attractive people, sure, but we're also kind of repelled by the threat of emotional drama. Dua Lipa's whole vibe feels safe. Why? Because the perceived emotional cost of paying attention to her is just super, super low. All right, let's move on to our next piece of the puzzle. And this one's a really fascinating paradox that's right at the heart of her appeal. We're calling it accessible aspiration, because she manages to live in this very specific space, somewhere between the ideal and the real. So first things first, let's just establish the baseline. I mean, objectively, she's successful, she's talented, she's beautiful. She's operating on a level that is, without a doubt, aspirational. She's an ideal that people are naturally going to look up to. Simple as that. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, this is the paradox. She also comes across as approachable. She doesn't do that whole untouchable goddess performance. Her vibe isn't, I exist on a different planet from all of you. It's that exact mix, the ideal and the accessible, that makes her appeal so powerful. And this quote, it just nails the concept perfectly. See, for the fantasy of a connection to even work, you need to feel like it's accessible. If someone is too perfect, too idealized, your brain just kind of checks out. The fantasy feels impossible. But Dua Lipa, she operates in what our source calls the corridor of possibility. The idea that you could just sit near her. It grounds the fantasy just enough to make it feel real. Even if, let's be real, it's probably not going to happen. Okay, on to our third piece of evidence. Here, we're going to look at the nature of her seduction. And what's interesting is, it's not really about what she does, it's about who she is. And that creates this psychological response that's so powerful because it feels so pure. So her presence creates what the source calls a clean dopamine loop. It's basically a 3-step process. Step 1, you just admire how she looks, her aesthetic. Step 2, that admiration makes you curious. And then step 3, that curiosity turns into attraction. But you know what's missing here? And this is key. Anxiety.
There's no tension, no desperation in the signal she's putting out there.
And the distinction here is so important. She isn't performing seduction. She's embodying it. You can tell she knows she's attractive, but she's not radiating this need for you to confirm it for her. Like our source says, attraction is highest when it is not begging. It's that effortlessness that's at the core of her magnetism. And for gay men, maybe that comes out as just pure aesthetic appreciation. For straight men, it's more of a direct pull. But it's the same magnet, right? Just attracting different poles. Okay, let's get to our final pillar of analysis before we land on the diagnosis. This one is all about how our brains actually process her. And maybe, surprisingly, it's about the importance of simplicity and the lack of a certain kind of social trigger. So Dua Lipa is what you might call high signal, low noise. What does that mean? Well, it means she's just easy to look at, easy to process visually. Her features are symmetrical, her expressions are usually pretty neutral, her whole camera presence is simple. Your brain doesn't have to work hard to figure her out. There's no emotional math you have to do. This is what we call efficient beauty. And our brains are just wired to like attractiveness that doesn't make us work for it. This also connects to that whole cool girl thing, the girl who's just effortlessly chill, never creates drama. But here's the thing, normally that's a performance. It's a strategy, usually for male validation. But with Dua Lipa, it doesn't feel like she's performing it. It feels like she just is it. And that perceived authenticity is why it works so well for her. It doesn't set off our cringe detectors, which, believe it or not, is a huge factor in attraction. Okay, so we've now looked at all 4 pillars of our investigation. It's time to put it all together, to synthesize these findings. We're ready to present the final diagnosis, the complete formula for her universal magnetism. So here it is, the final formula. It's really a combination of 4 things working together. You've got high attractiveness, that's the baseline, you gotta have that. You've got low chaos, which gives us that feeling of emotional stability and safety. Then there's low cringe, so she doesn't make us feel socially awkward. And finally, high efficiency, which just means our brains can process and admire her without any effort. When you put it all together, she's magnetic because she just doesn't trigger our deepest anxieties about fear and shame. So what's the big takeaway here? What does this all mean? Well, it means Dua Lipa represents this kind of perfect equilibrium. She exists at that exact, precise temperature where desire isn't threatening and where admiration isn't exhausting. And when you look at it that way, the fact that everyone has a crush on her isn't some big mystery. It's just the predictable result of a very rare and very potent psychological formula. End of analysis.